Upping your life and moving to a new part of the world is a tale as old as time. In fact, some studies show that it all began nearly 2 million years ago when some early humans, feeling adventurous, left Africa and overstayed their tourist visas in Eurasia. #YOLO. Last year, it's estimated that 184 million people lived outside the country they were born in. But why? Well, I'm Chris Russell.
And I'm Rob Pom.
And we want to know why people uproot their lives and move to a new part of the world. We want to explore what impacts the decision to leave has, not only on their lives, but also on the lives of those they love and care for the most. This is Here and Air. Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Here and Air, a podcast about why we leave. Hello, mate. How are you?
Very well, mate. Very well. Episode 5, you say? Mate, the haters. They didn't think we could get here, but here we are.
It's a real milestone for us. I'm very happy. Congratulations to you and to your family for this massive achievement.
And to you.
What has been happening with you, mate, since we spoke last?
What has been happening? Well, I am in the midst of trying to find a new job, which has been a rather arduous and laborious and horrible task. But other than that, I've been moving house. So that's been rather exciting. We've just moved back to your favourite place, Bondi Beach, and couldn't be happier. The house is wonderful. The garden is even better. And the garden opens up so many dog-enriched opportunities that I've already spoken to some breeders. And my dog, who has been named, but I don't want to name him just yet in case someone who's listening steals the name.
You stole the name, though. You stole the name.
No, I didn't.
I know the dog's name.
I mean, but you don't get many of
You
them.
stole the name from a meme.
No,
or
I didn't. No,
a
I
viral
didn't.
moment from 2010.
No, I didn't. Stop lying. And he will arrive in late January, and I could not.
Oh, you've ordered them.
I've spoken to 2 breeders, and they're confident that they will have puppies in the new year.
Oh, that's very nice. That's very nice. It's good that you've taken the moment to be unemployed and moved to one of the nicest neighborhoods in Sydney. You do it well. I'm gonna be like, unemployed life suits you.
Mate, does a struggling businessman turn up to his latest business venture in a worse car? No, he turns up in a Ferrari. Perception, yeah?
You're faking it till you make it. Is that what it is?
Exactly. No, look. It
not
came
really-
about.
it's not really
We
Bondi,
couldn't
is
say
it?
no. Had to move. Look, it is.
Is it even Bondi? I mean, we don't know because I've not been there. So you're just telling me, is it like Coogee instead? It's actually Coogee, isn't it? It's not Bondi. It's not Bondi at all.
It's
fake
basically
Bondi.
it's Bellevue Hill. I just moved down the road. So other
All
than
right.
that, mate, ticking along, having a great time, thinking about dogs, trying to get a job. It's all happening. What about yourself, fine sir? What's been happening?
Mate, it's been all very energetic in the UK, actually.
Well, we've got a new prime minister.
Oh.
Huzzah!
Got a new prime minister. So yeah, that election was all kind of energetic. By the time this episode goes out, the Euros will be over, and either you'll be celebrating an England win, or I'll be celebrating an England loss. Not
Do you
quite
know,
sure.
I could not care less. I think the last time I watched the Euros, Gareth Southgate was playing and he missed a penalty, and it was heartbreaking. I think it was
Oh, mate,
96 when football was apparently coming home then. That was a long time ago.
I mean, it's still coming home, but looks things. It's just taking the long way around. So yeah, we've got the Euros going on. We've had elections. I've been to Wimbledon. I've been to gigs. Mate, I went to centre court. Bucket list item: centre court at Wimbledon. Watched Djokovic play. He was brilliant. It was actually really annoying because it was Andy Murray was supposed to play singles that day, and he pulled out. So I would have liked to have seen him play one last time at centre court. But what can you do? And then what else was I doing? I was at the Killers. Oh, by the way, Killers live. I saw them at the O2. I've never been to the O2 before
This
in
is
London.
such a
Another bucket list.
this is so contentious. I cannot tell you how much this grinds my gears to hear you say that they were good.
Why?
They are a one album band at best.
No,
Hot Fuss
no.
is sublime, but there is nothing I want to listen to on Sam's Town and after. And he is almost at the point of being intolerable.
I
Over to
could
you.
not disagree with you more, mate.
Well,
They firstly they were it was hit after hit after hit. They opened with Mr. Brightside, hit after hit after hit. He's up there in a sparkly suit, killing it, like killing it. He had the crowd in his hand. They've just done 6 nights at the O2
yeah,
in
they had the crowd in their hand because
London.
they were fans of the band.
Ah, no, very, very good. Anyway, I'm not going to let you ruin that for me. It was
No,
brilliant.
look, and fair enough. And you know, you will coming from a guy that really likes you too. I think that really sets the tone.
I love you too. Um,
I love you too.
so yeah, so I went to the O2 Arena, which used to be called the Millennium Dome. So that was fun. I've never been in it before. I'd
You
only ever
won't
seen it
believe
on.
this, but I've danced at the Millennium Stadium.
Have you?
Yeah,
The Millennium Stadium is a different thing. Millennium Dome.
Millennium Dome. Yeah, not the Morva Stadium in Wales. I've danced at the Millennium Dome. Yeah. So, quick story for you. I was a young man of maybe 15-ish. I was in my GCSE year, and my drama teacher said, "Oh, do you want to do this Worcestershire Arts Council thing?" And me and this lad who I was quite competitive with got pulled aside, and we went and spent, I think it was like a few weeks um, devising this kind of like interpretive dance piece to articulate the story of Worcester's history. And then we performed it in about, I think it was early 2000s. So it was like just ticked over into the millennium. And we were one of the first schools that, or rather, we were one of the first counties to go and perform there. And my mum came, and my dad came, and I was dressed in like a leotard, I'm pretty sure. Thankfully, I don't think there were any photos of that time. And it was sponsored by McDonald's. So we had McDonald's for dinner. And that's the end of that story.
I mean, the Killers sounds better. Um, but you know,
Yeah. Do you know, I would still take my leotard over the Killers. That's how much I
no,
dislike the Killers.
no, the Killers were great. But the O2 is brilliant. I've never been there before. The only times I've ever seen the O2 was when James Bond fell on it in that
Ah,
movie,
yeah.
which
Yeah, yeah.
and then when they introduced it onto the opening credits of EastEnders. Otherwise, I'd never seen it.
You
All
didn't.
I've, so I'd never been inside it. So that was fun. And then to round off the weekend, I went to the British Grand Prix and I watched Lewis Hamilton win his ninth, I think, British Grand Prix, which is really, really cool.
So
So
you're living quite a rock and roll lifestyle. I'm thinking about how to regrow the turf that isn't growing in my grass patch, and you're hanging out with Brendan Flowers and Lewis Hamilton. That's quite
and
quite different.
it's been a different week. Look, do you know what it is? It's one of those things like actually just being closer to, I mean, just being in the UK, there's just so much going on. Now, granted, you could see the Killers in Australia, and you could go to the Australian Open, and you can go to Melbourne Grand Prix. So it's been a good week, but there's just a lot of stuff going on here.
Mm.
And I've got my brother over this weekend coming. He's coming over, my little nephew, and we're going to do all the touristy things. So it's all very wholesome and good at the minute.
Do you, when the Irish come over to do quote unquote touristy things, what does that look like, and how much of a bashing do the English get, and how one-sided is the information you give your nephew?
Um, oh, look, it depends on the person.
Ah.
Yeah,
So if
I've
it's your
got.
brother, he's quite balanced, and if it's you, it's no. Listen here, these
They
fucking English.
see that they stole that from us. Yeah, see that they built. They built. That's
And in
cool, isn't
fairness,
it?
they probably did.
They built that with the money that they stole from us. Yeah. That one in there. Oh, they stole that from the Greeks. Yeah. No, they stole that from the Greeks. No, that was stolen from the Egyptians. Oh, no, yeah, in the Indians. Yeah, no, they stole that there. No, look, it's what it will be. I think will be a lot of going. Jesus, how much? How much? How much?
Jesus, how
Jesus,
much?
price of things here.
Oh.
Shall we get into the episode, mate?
Mate, I would love to. If you let me do the honors this week, we are interviewing my good friend Nia. I can't pronounce her second name, so I'm not going to try. Nia is she's an advisory director, and she works for a company called Trends Intelligence, and she's basically tasked with predicting what's going to happen in the future, which I think is a perfect job for her, and you'll see why when we interview her. But she's a fascinating human being, and her story starts in Wales and weaves and meanders all over the place. And I think I was really keen to meet with Nia and put her story in people's ears because she has very much moved around, and having experienced a country in a certain way initially, she didn't let that be the presiding and overriding experience of that country. She went away and then came back and started a completely new experience with the person that she ended up marrying. So it's a really interesting story, and it's certainly interesting from the perspective of, you know, starting young families in places where you don't have support networks and things like that. So very keen for people to hear this story. Nia's a wonderful speaker. I should add that we recorded in a rather public spot. I thought it'd be nice to get some ambient sound. Turns out it sounds more like we're under the flight path of Sydney Airport. I can assure you we're not. But so there's a little bit of plane noise, could you say?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of good for the type of podcast that we are, that you've been interrupted by the 11:10 to London, the Jetstar 11:15 to Melbourne, the Qantas 11:20 to Brisbane.
Yeah.
So they all get a mention in there, which is great.
All right. Well, without further ado, let's meet Nia.
Hello, Robert.
Hello. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be
Yeah,
here.
thanks very much. We've chosen this idyllic scenery for your maiden voyage on the Here and Air podcast.
Yeah, we're on Woollahra golf course. Our future sits ahead of us here, playing out for us to observe. Do I want to retire in Australia? Play golf all day? These are the questions we'll tackle.
We've certainly seen the full gamut of capability as far as golfing goes. As I say, welcome. It's great to have you on board. Chris and I wanted to create a podcast that looked at the reasons why people pack up their belongings and bugger off to different countries. And I guess I wanted to talk to you because I was here when you first arrived in Australia. And subsequently you have been back and forth. You are not from the same place as Chris and I, and you've got a very interesting and, you know, kind of colourful journey as far as immigration goes. So I just wanted to sort of, you know, have a little chat about that, really. So for the people listening, tell us a little bit about yourself and I guess the kind of broad brushstrokes of how you came to be in Australia.
I am Welsh. I grew up on the southwest coast of Wales until I was 18, at which point I went to university in London and then spent many years, my early career there. I first moved to Australia when I actually can't remember now, my late 20s. But I am a Boomerang Pom, a Boomerang Pom, as they say. So, as you mentioned, I have moved back and forth. So I originally moved over on a working holiday visa in my late 20s, lived here for around 3 years. At that point, it had only ever been temporary. I think I'd envisaged going over for a year. I'd had friends move over here. I'd made some Australian friends in London, who hasn't, who were, of course, friendly. They were our neighbours, and having grown up watching neighbours, it was inevitable that they would speak to us over the fence or whatnot. So yeah, had a bunch of Australian friends in London. Became very close to. They moved back here, and I came over for one of their weddings. And as I was here, I thought, gosh, what an amazing place. What a wonderful place to live. I don't think I'd ever considered living here before. I had always considered living somewhere else. It took a few years before I did. I think the seed was planted, and then it took being sort of bored in my job at the time, or my career, becoming single and just feeling a bit sort of free and in need of a change for me to make the move over here. I got a working holiday visa. It's pretty easy for a Brit if you're under 30. Moved over, but happened to get a job that sponsored me anyway, so I was able to stay a little bit longer. Didn't have to go and work on a farm somewhere to stay.
I think you would have made a great berry picker.
You know what? I romanticised it quite a lot, and I thought, imagine the tanning possibilities on a working farm.
Let's discount the arduous and sometimes horrific working conditions, but tanning opportunities.
Tanning opportunities would have been absolutely maximised. Okay. Yeah, that real outdoorsy lifestyle, chance to pick up a new skill.
It's the Queensland tan.
Exactly. Yeah, I wouldn't have been averse to that. And being at a point as well when I was I wanted to change my career. Perhaps farming might have been good for me at that point.
Calling. It could have been a real, you'll never know. No.
I will never know. But I then, having had an amazing time, like I said, it was only ever temporary, and so I wanted to try moving back home to the UK. And I had a place on a master's course, so there was sort of a reason to move back then. It wasn't like, and it never ever felt like this, it didn't feel like I was going back because it hadn't worked over here. I was going back because I wanted to try something else. Like I mentioned, I was a bit sort of stale in my career. The move to Australia, while it had been good for my career, I was still sort of thinking, I don't want to continue working in this field. So a master's was a shift change for my career. I then spent 4 great years in London. I was quite content being back home, but Australia was still there in the back of my mind. I had taken a risk moving back to the UK without securing a permanent residency. I hadn't stayed there long enough and worked long enough to get that. But I knew that there would be ways of getting back here, sort of getting a job, etc. I chose the unindependent woman path. Instead of going back with a job, I married an Australian instead. The old-fashioned way.
The old classic.
Yes. Someone I had met actually when I was about to leave Australia. He was about to leave Australia too, to do sort of the same as I had done and do the equivalent of a working holiday visa over in the UK. So we sort of met up back in the UK, fell in love, got married, and because I'd always had this, amazing experience in Australia, I had always thought I'd go back at some point. We discussed going back quite often, and it was, I suppose, a chance to see Australia in a different way, as a sort of someone with a partner, perhaps with the intention of starting a family. And that's really probably the reason we did move back in the end. I was able to get a de facto partner visa at that point to move back. So I've been here since. That was in 2020. So I've been here for 4 years. 2 quite different experiences. I think.
Okay.
One was, moving as a single person in my late 20s. The second time was as a married person about to start a family. Less parties on boats, but still like to go to a party. I know.
Space for a party
On a boat.
On
if
a
anyone
boat.
would like to invite me to a party on a boat, I'll be there.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. Now, we're gonna go right back to the start.
Mm-hmm.
Right back to the start.
Right
in fact,
back.
because whilst you mentioned you grew up and are from Wales, that's not where your background is based, is it?
My mother is Welsh, but my father is English but with Polish heritage. So his parents, my grandparents, came over to the UK during the war. So my dad was very much raised with a sort of within a Polish culture. So I definitely grew up with that sort of half culture. One very Welsh side, my mother's side of the family, my grandparents, the Welsh-speaking family, but then also the sort of Polish culture as well, and that sense that my grandparents had immigrated to a country, and I guess I've always seen that sort of, how fortunate I have been. I was born in Wales, super lucky to have been born there. When I think about moving country, it's always sort of for the better, not under any stressful circumstances. I guess I view immigration, because my grandparents were sort of war refugees, I view refugee status I have, specific views and opinions on that, and how important it is to let people into your country, not just Brits who have cash to spend on a visa and can get a job easily,
Quite.
that sort of
Quite.
that privilege that we have. Yeah.
Growing up, did that sort of, clash of cultures, did that in any way, was that problematic, or was that quite enjoyable, or did you, because I think one of the things that I certainly struggled with, having a mixed race background, is that kind of mix of cultures, whereby I didn't really feel like I was in either camp. Did you experience that, or was it a bit more clean cut for you?
It was a little clean. I mean, it would be more sort of traditions, etc. I'm white British, so I didn't ever have any struggles, I guess, in that way. But we had, traditions that were different. We always did Christmas differently, which probably felt strange as a child. We always celebrated Christmas Eve, and while all my friends were going to the pub in my teens, I was like scuttering off home for an early Christmas Eve dinner. But actually, as I grew older, I kind of liked it, and I carry on that tradition now. Christmas Eve is a huge thing for me, to the point where if I spend time with my husband's Australian family, I get very itchy on Christmas Eve that no one is doing anything special enough. And I make him take me out for a margarita in the afternoon. That's not particularly Polish. Polish would be to have a 12-course meal, some vodka, look for the first star, etc., which isn't something you can really recreate in Australia. But I have tried to recreate it. We have a Christmas Eve party sometimes here, which everyone loves because it's a little bit different.
I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but that's Nagilia?
I don't know. What's that? What does that mean?
That is what the celebration is.
It could be. Do you know, I've never known what it's actually called.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I could impart this piece of
As
Polish,
you can tell, I'm
culture
not.
on you.
Yeah. I don't speak much Polish. I have the odd word.
Okay. So
but
you're about as Polish as I am Sri Lankan.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
Have I answered your question though? Was it clean cut in culture?
Yeah, like there was
more,
some
more
interesting
around traditions, etc.
Yeah, more around traditions. Yeah. Okay, so with regards to sort of having, at least one side, I guess, of the family that was experienced and had an understanding of immigration, and certainly, yeah, I mean, when you're immigrating under duress, it's a completely different story. But I guess, were the seeds there, and were they sown by that sense of, I can go off and see and do and experience other, or do you think that came about from purely just, I'm inquisitive, I want to go and experience the world?
Thinking about it, so if I look at the other side, so not my dad's side but my mum's side, my mother, as I said, was Welsh and had lived in Wales all her life apart from some time in England. She moved around a lot as a child. My grandfather was a policeman, and so they moved a lot with his job. And she's often talked about not having an unhappy childhood by any means, but feeling unsettled by that and never really sort of making friends at school, her brother and her, or making friends, but always then moving on. And my parents have actually lived in the same house now since I was 2 months old.
Wow.
So I then grew up with a very stable childhood and place to live. They still live there. Who knows if they'll move. They are open to moving to Australia or anywhere else, so they're not adverse to it. But I think my mum was probably, I haven't asked her this directly, but perhaps wanting to create more of a stable childhood for me. Ironically, I don't know if this is ironic, but maybe then I have retaliated against that and wanted change. I was always curious, I moved to London for university rather than going to sort of the local university in Wales. I always wanted to kind of push myself a bit further. So
you mean you didn't want to go to Swansea
University? I think everyone from my school went to Cardiff, and I thought, well, it's just going to be school in a different place. It's going to be school with more alcohol. So yeah, I wonder about that and the stability that I had, that now I sort of in my later years I have done something different.
Well, I can completely empathise with that sense of rebellion, because whilst my parents got divorced when I was quite young, I was too young to sort of recognise that it was kind of happening in a way. And we were in Worcester from I don't know, I was probably about 6 or 7-ish until I was about 19-ish. So there's a good solid chunk of solid, stable, you know what you're getting with Worcester. It is, pretty cookie cutter, white England, do you know what I mean? So there was always a sense of like, what else is there? Because growing up in Worcester, I don't know if you felt this with South Wales. Once you've done a lap of the city, or and I do use that very loosely with Worcester. It is the smallest city in the UK, which is actually smaller than some towns. There, you're like, okay, there has to be more to life, and there has to be more to the world than HMV and WH Smith's and the Cornish pasty store.
I mean, I do miss WH Smith.
Do you?
So they have them at the airports here, and I'm always like,
that has to be one of the most bizarre things about Australia. I don't know why you wouldn't branch out beyond the airport.
Yeah.
Why only the airport?
Why only? Questions to be answered another time.
Questions to be answered in another podcast, maybe.
A dedicated app.
Dedicated to WH Smith's. And I think that's really interesting around, like, I guess, having that sense of wanting to experience other. Do you think that the time that you when you first were like, right, I'm gonna go to London, was that a similar sort of experience as when you first came over here? Because a lot of the time, people who come over here, like, the reason that they come over here is that you can quickly sort of transfer, I guess, your skill set and your knowledge base from the UK to Australia. Like, it's not such a gargantuan leap between the two countries. Yes, geographically it is, but culturally you can slot in
culturally
quite
it's very
easily.
easy. It's the same language. It's a very easy place to live in because it's so pleasant, I suppose. Moving to London, I think similarity, that was easy. I think I remember it being easy anyway. It was a long time ago. But I was moving for university. You move into halls and then it creates a network for you. Then you have your friends and you feel settled reasonably quickly, or at least I did. And then moving here in my 20s, like I said, I did know some people here already. And then you are sort of thrown into this network of, that's how we met. We had a mutual friend back home who knew that you lived out here. I was moving over and said, you should hang out with my friend Rob. He's great. She wasn't wrong. And, you become quite friendly quite quickly because that person understands how difficult it is to move to the other side, or easy, or, how you need to set up that network, and they invite you to things with friends, they show you around the places to go, and so I think it was reasonably easy when I did it then. I think it gets harder the older that you are. I didn't find it hard per se moving back. I found it harder in ways I'm trying to put my finger on. I already had a network here, but I needed to sort of slip back into it again.
Yeah.
My life was changing a bit. I was about to have a baby, so I obviously wasn't going out and drinking with all of my old friends anymore. So that was a bit difficult. But yeah, I would say it was reasonably easy, the move from Wales to London and then from London to Australia.
Yeah, it felt like quite a natural transition.
Yeah.
I think you've hit upon a word that I really want to, because I obviously know about your story, but this sense of network, and I guess because you did come over in at two completely different times of your life, like that kind of free single, let's go out and have fun, and then a more considered, well, actually, Matt and I are going to bring in a life into the world. We have to, just amend and adapt according to the situation. Did that in any way present itself as a challenge? Like, was that something that you were very conscious of because you didn't have necessarily those, like you may have had your friendship networks, but did the fact that, your immediate family, they're not necessarily on your doorstep, and the same with Matt?
Yeah, I think absolutely the lack of a network. I mean, I already lived away from home in London. I wouldn't have had a network of my family being around the corner and there for Sunday lunch or to pop round in the afternoon sort of thing. So I was already quite adept at living without my immediate sort of family network. I did feel like I had a network of friends here that I could sort of rely on just for company, I guess. But then it was about, when I became a parent, setting up new networks, and that is done for you in some ways. You're put into a parents group, etc., and that's quite grounding, I think, when you're then forced to create your own networks. I probably always have had to set up my own networks. I'm an only child, so I was always, even going on holiday as a kid, having to make friends on holiday. Hello, does anyone want to play with me? So I've always been that person who has to sort of creep in and ask if someone wants to play. So creating those networks and it's the wrong word, but sort of nourishing those friendships and making sure that they are fed.
Of course, yeah. And do you think that, in a strange way, I find it so interesting that, and I don't know if this is a sign of the times or if it's a sign of that, you can build your family around you, I guess, when you move and you become, an expat. you get to decide who gets to be part of your world.
Yeah,
There's something quite
yeah.
nice about that, and that's kind of, whilst I'm not on that baby making trajectory
Yeah.
yet. Give me some time. Give me a couple more years at least. I think it's like there's something quite empowering, quite enriching about, not, because I don't know, like if to use your example, like to have your family like just round the corner, like that's nice, but that's also then, I don't know, there's a certain sense of obligation almost, whereas with your friends it's kind of like, that you
The
want
family
them.
you choose.
The
Yeah.
family you choose,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I definitely had, like, I remember since moving here, the first time I've had an Oz fam. Several of them have actually moved back home to the UK, but we called each other our family. And we were like, "Oh, should we have a family hang this weekend?" And it was very much creating those rituals that you might with a family, going around to someone's house on a Sunday afternoon, always meeting down the beach, etc. And though those friends that are still here locally in Sydney, I might not see them as much now. Our lives have changed and we don't have those sort of Sunday rituals, but we do, we try and see each other often and fall into that natural sisterly chat perhaps that we would have, where we sort of get deep pretty quickly, or are you okay? Are you really okay? Kind of chat, rather than a sort of superficial new friend sort of relationship, which stems from the fact that we had to become really close really quickly because we were all away from home. I should have explained that Australian family were all British, I think. Just touches on another topic, that a lot of my friends here are British, with the exception of a few Australians who aren't from Sydney. They're from, or my husband is from Queensland, another few friends from Queensland who've all come here, and they've also been the other that didn't go to school in Sydney, didn't have the school gang that they still hang out with. So they had to, latch onto someone, and I think my husband latched on. That's how we met, sort of through a mutual group of British friends. He had to latch on to them because they were also the outsiders.
The friends that you mentioned that went home, have you gained any insight as to why they decided to return and raise their family in the UK?
I think it's the pull of family, the pull of help, that sort of network. They've all moved quite close to their families. Perhaps they came from bigger families as well, brothers and sisters there. Although being an only child, I do feel, I'm the only child and I'm the other side of the world, so there's some guilt in that. Not that I have any pressure from my parents.
Well, I was going to ask, is there, like, you mentioned the two things, the family and the network. Is there from your perspective, you're perfectly comfortable with the networks and the,
Not entirely comfortable. I'm very grateful that I've set up a network here and parents group and great friends and friendships from that, and support in a different way. To the point where, if I was then to move from here, I would miss that and think, gosh, it's probably not worth moving away from that network that I've set up. But I do see friends, going out regularly, who have kids going out regularly on Friday night because the kid goes to stay with the parents, and I'm like, wow, imagine going out every Friday night with my husband. We have to go out one at a time, or get a babysitter, or ask a friend, which probably has more of an ask attached than, Mum, can you come over? So it's a different, it's a network that I'd be reluctant to leave now that I've set it up, but it probably doesn't have the depth of reliance that maybe a close family network might have.
Of course, and I guess I wanted to sort of pick apart that sense of guilt. Like, what do you think that stems from? I think I can probably hazard a guess, but it'd be interesting to get your thoughts.
Yeah, it's the sort of, being an only child and being away, having deserted my family, and now having their grandchild and their grandchild being over here.
Yes.
I'm very lucky though, because my parents have never put any pressure on me to move home, never indicated that they want me to. They very much see that I have a good life here, that their grandson has a good life here. I have friends who don't have such a sort of lucky scenario with their parents, where they've, you know, sort of been pressured to come home or made to feel the sadness that their parents have. Like, my parents don't impart that on me, but of course they must feel it, so I feel it, and feel some guilt there. But, you know, we talk about, perhaps Matt and I will be people who boomerang back and forth a lot and say, okay, let's go back and live in the UK for a couple of years, and so that my parents can have some real kind of quality time and see my son grow up. And then we'll bounce back here when we're like, oh, we miss the beach.
It's funny you say that. I wanted to, because I feel like sometimes it's very easy to dwell on the, if I'm here, well, what am I not doing back in the UK?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when you're in the UK, you're like, well, what am I missing out on in Australia?
Yeah.
I guess I want to ask you about, like, what do you see as having been the most beneficial, most illuminating aspects of immigrating and creating a young family over here?
It's the illuminating aspect of creating a young family over here. I think here, you know, I always knew it would be a great place to raise a family. It's a great place to party on boats, but it is also a great place to raise a family or bring children on boats too. I haven't reached that stage yet, but soon.
He's got his sea legs.
Yeah. For me, in the summer, taking my son to the beach every weekend, being able to lie there and read a book while he builds a sandcastle is wonderful. I think if I was, I don't think I would enjoy parenthood as much if I was in the UK, it was cold and rainy and we were having to do things indoors, go to a jungle gym. I would have tapped out.
A rainy jungle monkey gym in Winchester.
Yeah. So that's not for me. But it's interesting because I remember moving back from Australia back to the UK and taking elements of that with me. My husband and I would be the people like running around Brockwell Park in London at 7 a.m. Still doing all the outdoorsy things, the sort of hikes and all that sort of stuff, but they would always end in the pub, which they don't so much here. Or they'd end, you know, we'd do a run at 7 a.m. and look for a coffee shop that was open at 7:30 and nowhere was open until 9, and we'd be scratching at the doors, waiting for caffeine. I digress. But yeah, it's a wonderful place to raise a family, a very lucky place to be born. But I think touching on what you said at the start of your question, that sense of, you know, where feels like home, I think that's actually one of the most challenging things, because having lived in both countries now, I will never know what is home, or I feel like that at the moment. I'm like, well, when I'm in Australia, I miss elements of home. When I was at home, I miss elements of Australia, which can be a really tricky headspace to exist in, and I think a lot of people struggle with that. But you have to, and this is still a work in progress with me, you have to be very present where you are. And there's that phrase, isn't there, that the grass is only greener where you water it. So you have to really invest in your time here and make it the best it can be. One silly thing I did moving over the second time. The first time I arrived with a backpack and a few belongings. The second time I shipped my entire house, my whole belongings, most of the stuff that was still stored at my parents', things like Christmas decorations, my Monopoly and Scrabble, all of my paintings. I think I wanted to make whatever house or home or apartment I lived in really feel like home.
Yeah.
Even if it's temporary again, I wanted it to not feel temporary. I think one of my memories of living here the first time was buying a cheap duvet from Target, and then 3 years in winter still being cold, but being like, well, I'm not going to buy a proper duvet because I don't live here forever, so I'll just freeze through this. Or silly things like keep buying disposable toothbrushes and not buying an electric toothbrush. I could have shipped one home, but that feeling of it being temporary. So I really wanted to move here, ship all of my things, have them here. I also keep buying trinkets and ornaments for my home, so I want it to feel cluttered and lived in. Something new appears on the shelf every week that my husband will spot, and I think that's a symptom of that.
Just before I move on from this, do you think that's a product of Sydney itself? Like, I wonder if, say, you and I had met in Melbourne, or you and I had met in Brisbane, or anywhere else in Australia, really, other than Sydney, because I find Sydney to be quite transient.
Yeah.
And do you think that has sort of enhanced your desire to sort of, put down those roots, create more of a home? Because I certainly know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Whereby I did exactly the same thing. I was like, well, even if I'm moving apartments or moving into a house or whatever that looks like, I still need to feel like there's some connection to what I've done in the UK, how I've grown up, the things that I like. PG tips, for example.
Yorkshire Gold for me. Yeah.
Even!
Extra strong.
So that's property, that is.
Yeah. Sydney does feel very transient, and also there's always that feeling that your friends are going to move away.
Yeah.
Either they're, your British friends are going to move back home, or your Australian friends are going to move to a cheaper city, because it's a wonderful city, but I think at the moment it's the second most expensive city in the world. The cost of living, housing, etc. Woohoo! So we will all be priced out at some point, or have to make a compromise, and so there's always that fear that that people will move. So you think, okay, I need to put down the roots, and I need to need to create the stability in that nest.
It's so interesting you say that, because Rach and I have obviously just moved to a place that I now feel is definitely at the top end of where I want to be paying rent. If it was a mortgage, it'd be different. And more recently, my stepbrother Billy, who I'm very close with, he's definitely making noises about moving to Byron, and they were like, they're obviously really excited about it, but I'm like,
don't do it.
But what about the family times on a Sunday?
Yeah. And you've been lucky; you've had that family connection here, haven't you?
I've
to
been
settle
spoiled
into.
with that. And it was, and in a strange way, like I didn't have, like, I always liked Billy. He was part of my family, but we didn't have a relationship that we do now. And especially with him having a young family as well, like, that's going to be really tough for me. Like, I don't want to see that go. I just want to kind of come back to, Sydney more generally, and this idea of being here and thinking about those positives.
Yeah.
One of the things that I distinctly remember when our mutual friends Ben and Barney went home for a visit before they left Australia and moved back. And one of the things that Ben said to me was this idea of safety. How unbelievably safe Australia feels.
Yes,
now, I know that there's always going to be the odd
incident
here and there, as is often the case, but touch wood, we're generally pretty blessed with that kind of, like, I leave doors unlocked, I leave laptop in cafe on bench.
We all leave our phones on the beach and go for a swim, which is
Do you
perhaps
think
insanity, but
do you think that's part, a sort of maybe not the first thing that comes to mind, but do you think that's a sort of subconscious
it's
thing?
huge? Yeah, I'd almost put it as one of the first. No, let's say the sunshine and the beaches and etc. first. But safety is pretty high up there. I went back to London for a visit last year, and I love London, and I always, pride myself on how streetwise I was when I lived in London, or, not streetwise, but like always on the lookout for it. I remember my husband when he first moved to London, and he left his wallet like on the table in a pub, and I was like, what are you doing? Don't do that.
That
You don't do that around here.
That should be glued to your body.
Yeah, exactly. And safety. You know, I was saying I went back to London last year, and I was like, gosh, I feel so unsafe, and little girl in the big city, which I don't feel here. It's a big city, and yet you feel so safe. Yeah, you know, like you said, you know, doors open, phones on the beach, the crystal blue water, everything is peaceful and calm, and that is a big thing, and it's a bigger thing now that I have a young child. You know, I'm concerned for his safety, and do I want him to grow up in a really safe environment, or do I want him to know how it is to have to look out for yourself a little bit? There's that as well. But no, I think I get scared of the idea of moving back to the UK a lot, but because of that safety aspect, for sure. Yeah, and that sort of feeling, I'm never on edge here. I would always walk home after a night out and not even think about it. Whereas there, you sort of have to watch out for it.
You've got to be on your A game.
Got to be on it,
yeah. And Rach and I have these conversations all the time about that, like the male privilege of not having to worry about things like that.
Yeah,
is massive.
It is.
Even like in our relatively quiet, sleepy suburb of Bondi Beach, right? She still is very conscious of the roads that she will take back. From the main main Hall Street in Bondi back to our house, and it just doesn't cross my mind at all. That should be a consideration. Despite the I guess the challenges and the good and the good things as well. Is there anything you would change, or anything that you sort of think, oh well, that could present itself as something that I would like to fix or perhaps amend in a certain way?
No, I think I don't regret having moved here at all. I'm so lucky. What an amazing opportunity I've had, and an opportunity to do it very differently both ways. I think it's probably the only thing I would change is I'd like my brain to have that to have less of that sort of unsettled feeling. But I don't know, unsettled is the wrong word, because I do feel very settled. This feels like my home, but I wonder if it should be forever. I'm always wondering, but will it be my forever home? It is my home, but will it be my forever home? And
by that, do you mean Sydney or do you mean Australia?
I mean Sydney, actually, because I've moved so far from my home. I've settled in Sydney, made a network here. If I think of living somewhere else in Australia, I'd have to start over again. And that would be difficult. So I think, I can't live anywhere else other than Sydney now in Australia, because I've created this network and I don't want to leave it. If I was to move somewhere else, I may as well move back home and be with those friends or something. But it feels very like home, and I'm reluctant to leave because it's so wonderful. Life is great. It's so safe. It's also very clean, which is not to be underestimated.
No, I totally agree.
Another thing I noticed, other than feeling not at ease in London, was I was like, gosh, everything's so filthy and dirty. My child keeps picking up cigarette butts from the floor. I haven't seen a cigarette butt in years here. People are so good at putting rubbish in the bins. You really got to seek them out. So there's a real sort of feeling of comfort here as well, because of that as well, how nice it is, how beautiful it is, the joy that the sunshine brings you every day. As well, so I wouldn't change any of that because it's all wonderful. I would like to be able to change my mindset. Maybe I should go to therapy about it.
You're talking to the wrong guy if you want to change your mindset about it. But it's more sort of, it's not always about going home. It's about, would I like to live in Asia for some time? If I got a job offer in Hong Kong, I'd take that, because I've now got this hunger for how great it is to live somewhere else. But then again, all of these negatives I've spoken about, I've created this network in Sydney and made it a home. Do I want to do that again? Certainly more difficult as we approach. Are we calling this midlife now?
Yeah, we're calling it midlife.
Aren't we?
I think midlife's quite hard. I actually am quite excited about retirement. because we'll have freedom again, and that's the point where we go and live somewhere else. Like, might buy a little house in Portugal.
Ooh.
Or shall we all go and live in France?
Then we can actually learn how to play golf.
We can actually learn how to play golf, yeah.
I think one of the things you touched upon there, and I will let you return to watching these wonderful golfers at Willara Golf Course very shortly. But I think it's that, for me, one of the sort of glaring things that is missing here, that you do have to have a bit of a trade-off, is that kind of ingrained, inherent history and culture. You know, I know that sounds kind of harsh, but you know, you're talking about, you know, living in a country with thousands of years of invasion and immigration and stuff, as opposed to you know, certainly being kind of quite sheltered from that in Sydney, where it is quite how to describe it, affluent, white, you know. Yeah. And I think that for me, that's one of the things that always keeps me going. Oh, can't get this foot out of the UK, because I know what it's like. But do you think as a like, do you think that, you know, you talk about that sort of being able to read a book, that the little one play in the sand and not have to worry about it? Do you think that there is that sense of, well, look, it is up to me as a parent to be able to say, right, okay, I'm not going to put my child in dangerous, unsafe situations. But, you know, to be able to go back and have that sort of privilege to be able to go back and be like, look, this is what a proper big city is like.
Big city, a multicultural
and just
city.
Sort of, you know, maybe just ease him into that.
I do. It's hard, because a friend who immigrated to Dubai recently told me this. You know, we were talking about Dubai and the type of country it is, and someone had said to her, "Why do you live in Dubai? It's not real life." And she said, "Because do I get a prize for living somewhere difficult? Why wouldn't I, if I, you know, she has a job there and she has a really nice life, and she's like, why wouldn't I choose a really nice life for myself, rather than make it hard for myself in slightly." So I was like, well, that's interesting.
It wasn't real life.
They're saying that Dubai wasn't real life. It's too easy, and you just get lots of money and you sit in the sun all day. And Dubai is very different culturally to Australia. But I was like, and I've thought about that a lot recently. You know, sometimes life here seems too simple. Do I want my son to grow up in, as you say, a sort of affluent white area where he doesn't see, you know, different colour people, like many people of colour? And so that plays on my mind a lot. But then Australia does have a rich history. It's just ignored it's a lot of the time and covered over, and hopefully, you know, I hope to be that parent that teaches him that, and it helps him realise about that rich sort of history and culture that enriches this country and takes away some of that sort of boringness sometimes, I guess, but pleasantly boring. Pleasantly boring. But it does play in my mind that sort of like, well, but why would I make life hard for myself and or my son?
And now we're going to play fantasy scenario. Now we're going to skip forward 18 years.
Cool.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
How's
my skin looking?
It's looking as good today as it
Great.
did back then.
I'm glad I invested in that skincare.
Yes. Your son comes to you and says, I'm off. I know.
Yeah.
How does that, does that enter into your psyche now?
Yeah, it does. But in my mind, he's off to space, because by then he, you know...
Oh, well, go, young man.
Space travel will be possible at this time, and he's sort of saying to me, Mum, I'm off to Mars, but I'll be back in a few light years.
Right, okay.
It plays on my mind a lot, but I don't know, I'm not fearful of it. I sort of guess that we can, let's say he doesn't move to Mars and he moves somewhere else in the world, it will be a great opportunity to come and visit him. You know, my parents enjoy coming to visit me here. They get to escape every January and escape the British winter and come over here, so hopefully I might have that as well, and so I would definitely encourage him to go. Might follow him. creepy mum.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
Oh.
Yeah, hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, David Bowie's in Mars. Yeah. Oh, and this is my mum.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's
good.
come along. Yeah. Yeah, that definitely. Yeah, I think about that all the time actually. So we always talk. I still have a little flat in London. Probably can't afford to keep it, but we sort of talk about keeping it so that he can go and have his like gap year in London.
Sure.
My husband also talks about how he'll be over there with him going to gigs at Brixton Academy. So it looks like we're going to be really creepy parents. So yeah, I think about how he'll probably. I mean, he's got 2 passports already. I'm hopefully going to have my Polish ancestry passport soon, so I'll have an EU passport. So he will have that too. So he might be a world citizen.
Yeah, well, it sounds like an enormously privileged position to be in, and I think that's what's so unique and so interesting about our collective stories is that we do have these opportunities to go out there and see it, whereas other people don't. Listen, wonderful. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
Just so interesting to hear your story, and best of luck with going to space.
Yeah, we'll tune in for the next episode when we're there.
Yeah, well, we look forward to you broadcasting your podcast. But thank you ever so much for your time today.
Thank you. It was a great chat.
It was a great chat.
Hey, if you liked what you heard, give us a subscribe and pop over to Here and Air on Instagram. Say hello. We'd love to hear from you.
And that's it.
That's it.